And thank you, Michael, for the excellent keynote on Singularity. So now we'll go ahead and jump in straight into the whole EasyBuild story. What I wanted to do, I wanted to take a look back at the last couple of years of EasyBuild, where we are now and where we are going to. So a bit of EasyBuild history. It all started in 2009 as an in-house project at Ghent University. It was created by Stijn de Weert, who is now our technical lead, and was back then as well. So he's a very busy guy, and when I joined the team in 2010, he basically shoved it into my lap and said, this pile of crap is yours now. You'll have to keep it going, maintain it, and make it a lot better than what it is now. Over the couple of years after that, we had several interns that helped us redesign the whole framework, like turn it upside down, break it into pieces again, put the puzzle back together, up until some point where we were happy to actually release it as an open source software. So this happened in April 2012. The .5 release was our first public release, which was done for the HEPIC Spring meeting, I think, back then, which we submitted a paper to or a presentation to. So it was done right before. And then the actual stable release, so 1.0, was done actually at supercomputing right before they started the opening party or something like this. In between, there was some activity, mostly with Fotis. So, Fotis, raise your hand. There he is. So he was the first person who picked up EasyBuild outside of Ghent. And started giving us feedback, and based on what the feedback we were getting, we made some changes to make it what we felt back then a stable release. It used to be one large code base, so as most of you know now, it's actually split up into 3 parts, so 3 different repositories. It has some benefits and some downsides, but we're fairly happy with how it is now, although I will come back to that later. In 2012, he also introduced the concept of easy blocks and extensions. That wasn't there at the very start, which is now a really familiar term. And we also started writing tests for the framework. So initially, it was a huge, well, a rather large code base, and we didn't really have any tests at all. And one of our interns actually told us, this is nuts, using this without any tests. So he started working on the tests, and we added a lot since then. 2013, we switched to the general option parser, which gave us a good way to configure EasyBuild on several levels. We added the bootstrap script because it turned out to be a little bit painful to install EasyBuild, which is funny because it's a tool to install software with. So that's kind of a mess. And actually, it got better since then, but we still have issues with that. We added support for more toolchains and toolchain components. So initially, we only had GCC-based toolchains and OpenAPI and Intel, and gradually more stuff was added. We added support for LMOD as a modules tool, and also the other Tickle Pure version of Tmod that only some German sites were using in the DESA project, something like this. We added support for using custom naming schemes. So regular custom naming schemes and the hierarchical ones were added later. And the dry run overview was actually a contribution by somebody from NVIDIA. So we started getting nice features in that we didn't think of ourselves. So that was certainly good. So we go on, and you can see as we move on, the list is getting fatter and fatter. So we're adding more features in a year as we go along. So the GitHub integration, which is now used a lot for testing contributions, and also for people letting contribute back very easily. The try cooperation with the robot, which is a very useful feature. The hierarchical module naming schemes are here. Support for hidden modules, which I think also came up out of Jülich. At least the request came from Jülich. Lots of performance improvements of EasyBuild itself, because it was rather slow before these changes. And also together with Fotis. So we hired Fotis for a couple of weeks to basically port our documentation, which was on the GitHub wiki, to the Read the Docs platform. And since then, the documentation has been maintained there, and it's a lot better than it is on the wiki. 2015, the 2.0 release, with some backwards incompatible changes. So mostly the fallback to configure make that was little bit confusing, so we got rid of that. And we fleshed out VSC base as a dependency. So VSC base is the library that provides the general option parser tool, and also our logging tool and so on. So it used to be included as a copy, but that gave us some issues, so we fleshed it out as a proper dependency. A whole bunch of other things, so Cray support, which is something that me and Petar started working on in our free time. So a couple of late nights playing around on a Cray at CSCS, so Guilherme gave us access to that. That was a lot of fun, and it turned out to be very useful for the people at CSCS. A whole bunch of other things, I won't go over all of them. So the packaging support, which is something that Rob worked on. Optar's generic minimal tool chains, which was also done in Jülich, and so on. 2016, so again, fatter and fatter, a lot more features. The new PR and update PR is the continuation of the GitHub support. So this is how you can open pull requests just from the EasyBuild command line straight away. Not only does this help people who are not very familiar with Git and GitHub, it also speeds up our workflow to just push the easy configs out there. Adam is a big fan of that because it saves also us a lot of time. Let's see what else. We made the switch from our own internal Jenkins continuous integration server to Travis, because Jenkins was a bit of a pain. It couldn't keep up with all the contributions we were getting. And every now and then we ran into trouble with it, so we switched to Travis, and we haven't looked back since. Also late 2016, we had the EasyBuild 3.0, which is, strictly speaking, it's a backwards incompatible release, so minor changes that were backwards incompatible. The biggest one is actually just a change in the default configuration. So we switched to LMod as a default modules tool, Lua as module syntax, and GC3Py as the backend for submitting jobs with EasyBuild. Other than that, it was just a regular feature release, so nothing really fancy or nothing really heartbreaking, the backwards incompatibility. Something we also started doing with 3.0 is doing more frequent minor releases on request from the community. So we usually only did a major 2.5, 2.6, 2.7 release, and only where we really had to, when there was a very annoying bug in there, we did an extra minor release. Now we're actually switching that a little bit, so we do more frequent minor releases. So just get more easy configs and or simple updates to the easy blocks out there more quickly, and we don't let the framework stall the releases anymore, or at least not as much as we did. It's been working out quite well. I'm getting help from a guy in Singapore to do that, and that has been really useful. So he's been saving me quite a bit of time. So where we are today, we have EasyBuild 3.1, which was released just last week. Has a couple of new things, but nothing really major. Well, Damien may disagree with that, because he added some support in Optarch to specify the compiler flags on a per compiler basis, was implemented by Damien. Check style, which is for checking code style in easy config files, which is something we're going to use more and more. And we're also going to automatically review contributions using this to get rid of a bit of the feedback loop we have going on there. You have an FFTW easy block that builds the FFT library a lot better, so it maximizes the instructions it can use based on the system it's being built for. Updates for CP2K and WPS. The new common tool chains, which I will come back to in a bit, and a whole bunch of software packages. So we've added support for Chime, but we're kind of cheating because we're installing Chime via Conda, so we're not doing a full from source installation like we usually do. It's kind of a stopgap because we want to add proper support for Chime yet, but it's such a mess. It's taking us way too long, and we're using this as a kind of in-between step. And maybe this is something Gillian can come back to tomorrow. So this is actually, the Conda support was added by her, which has been really useful for us as well. TensorFlow is there as well, but we just installed the binary release for now because that's also a bit of a mess to get it to build from source properly. And if I'm brave enough tomorrow morning, I will actually try some live coding to write an easy block for TensorFlow, which is not there yet. We won't get it to work fully, but it will give you a good idea of how you can implement an easy block for something that has a non-standard build procedure. Some minor bug fixes as well. All the details are in the release notes. So just to highlight, especially for this release, there's a whole bunch of things that are being added by people here in Jülich. So Marcus, Damien, and Alan have been adding or actually implementing several of these features. So these are the ones worked in green. And the ones worked in yellow are, at least in my feeling, they have a big contributions to it in terms of giving feedback to what's there and so on. So Jülich is very much involved with the development of EasyBuild. The common tool chains. So who is using the common tool chains here in the community? So 5, 6, maybe 8 people. So the idea of the common tool chains is that we have some compiler tool chains that we try to promote inside of the in the community as being stable. So the idea is we have 2 flavors. We have a FOSS toolchain, which is it's short for free and open source software. So it's the standard toolchain that you see popping up a lot, GCC, OpenMPI, and so on. That's the current definition of the toolchain. This may change in the future if you have a good reason for it. So we can swap out OpenMPI for MPage, for example, and just keep the FOSS name. That may happen at some point. And we also have the Intel toolchain, which is the Intel compilers, MPI and MKL. So for the common toolchains, we have a 6 months update cycle. So we update them in December, January, with the intention of using that for the first 6 months of the year. And then we do another update in the middle of the year for the last 6 months of the year. So we've been doing this since 2014, so since the summer of 2014. And it's been gradually picking up speed. So more and more sites are using these common tool chains, which is good because then we get more easy config files using these tool chains, which makes it easier for the other sites using these tool chains as well. So it helps focus the effort a bit. Community growth. So I did a small update of the number of subscribers to the mailing list. It's been going up at a quite scary pace, actually. So I did a quick look at how many extra subscribers we've been getting by year. It's been picking up speed. Well, in 2016 it was the same as 2015, but it's still going up quite fast. This is both good and scary, because it also means we get more contributions, we get more feedback, we get more problems, that people try fancy things or try things on old OSs or very new OSs. But still, it's good. Still growing and growing fast. Also, in terms of getting contributions, still picking up speed. So we have a look at the number of unique contributors in each of the EasyBuild repositories here. So the blue line is the framework. Of course, you get less people contributing to framework because you have to know the framework a little bit. You have to know a good amount of Python, or at least you have to be very good at copy-pasting Python, like what Marcus does, for example, and just get it to work. So you have to be brave enough to dive in and make some changes there. Also for easy blocks, you need a bit of Python knowledge, but it's certainly less than in framework. So in framework, you have about 50 unique contributors now, which is really good. We never expected this to happen when we originally released EasyBuild as open source. Easy blocks is a little bit less. Of course, in easy config files, you get a lot more contributors because they are basically key value files. So it's a lot. You don't need to really know any Python to write some new or just update existing easy config files. So we're well over 100 unique contributors there. So also here, it's been picking up speed. So this is the numbers for the easy configs. We're getting more and more contributors or extra contributors every year. Of course, not all of these are still active, but at least more and more people have been contributing to EasyBuild. One thing I wanted to highlight in particular is the RPOD support. So this is a feature that was in high demand for quite some time. And last year we finally found time to flesh it out and have it implemented. It's still an experimental feature, so you need to use -- experimental to be able to use it. I should have added a link to the documentation here, but the whole, so the RPOD support is well documented on Read the Docs. It explains how to use it, how it is implemented in the framework, and so on. It also explains how to disable setting of the LD library path environment variables, which makes a lot of sense when you're using RPOD and so on. So it's close to being stable. So Pablo Escobar has been testing it really well. not the drug lord, but one of the EasyBuild contributors, has been testing it actively. He's been reporting some small issues. Most of them are fixed. I mean, there's just 1 or 2 more issues that we should get rid of before we can declare it really stable, but we're very close. There's a good overview of what is still there. The biggest one is, so this is getting really technical, but in RPOD you can use $origin as a marker for the actual installation prefix of the software, which gets resolved when it does, when it loads the libraries. But this turns out to be a problem. It breaks certain things like virtual env in Python. Can't handle this because it copies the Python binary to somewhere else, and then this origin thing is broken. So what we'll have to do is hard code the installation prefix instead, rather than using $origin. It's a fairly minor change, but you just have to find some time to do it. Some other requests are, so the way EasyBuild does RPOD, it uses some compiler wrapper script. So rather than calling the compiler directly, you're actually calling a wrapper which injects the RPOD compiler options, compiler arguments, and then it calls out to the actual compiler. This is all inside of EasyBuild, and you can't really reach it as a user, as an end user of modules. So one thing we should do is we should just install these wrappers, or optionally install these wrappers alongside the compilers. So also if users build their own software on top of the modules you provide, they would also be doing RPOD without actually knowing it. So that's certainly possible. We need to do some more tweaking left and right for certain software packages. There's an RPOD sanity check, so it checks whether the binaries that are generated can actually find all the libraries without having LD library path set. So that should work. And it also, you need to make very sure it actually does the RPOD linking, so it doesn't escape the wrapper script in some form. One software application that needs both of these customizations is OpenFOAM, because it uses CMake, which you can easily disable RPOD linking with CMake. And OpenFOAM doesn't call CMake directly, so you have to figure out how to really tell it to do the RPOD and not strip it later. And also because OpenFOAM doesn't install the binaries in the standard location, you need to make the sanity check aware where it has to look for the binaries that it should check during the RPOD sanity check. So it's not 100% perfect yet, but it's, let's say for 90% of the software, it does the proper thing. One other thing, and there's a pull request open for this for quite a while, but haven't been able to get back to it, or at least not been able to get some sufficient feedback on it, is adding the concept of link dependencies. So right now we have already the concept of build dependencies, of stuff that has to be available while you're building the software. We also have, of course, the runtime dependencies, so stuff that has to be there when you try to use the software. With RPOD, you actually get something in between. So link dependencies are dependencies that have to be there while building. And if you're using RPOD, you don't need them anymore at runtime. So it's something like in between. So if you have libraries, they have to be there to link at build time. But if you're using RPOD, it will find them anyway without having the environment set up properly, because it hard codes the path of the link dependencies. So we should start pulling these apart as well, which is a bit of effort, but it's not too bad. Currently, we only support RPOD. It would be fairly trivial to also support runPOD. So the difference between RPOD and runPOD is with RPOD, all the locations are hard-coded, and you can't really change it easily without patching the binaries that you get. With runPOD, it does the same thing, but if you then define LD library path, you can actually make it pick up other libraries quite easily, which may be a use case you're interested in. So some build tools use or prefer RPOD over runPOD. It depends on your user community a little bit, whether you want to be able, or whether you want to allow users to shoot themselves in the foot or not. That's basically what it boils down to. But they're close enough that it's easy. We can just add an option in EasyBuild to do runPOD rather than RPOD. It should be quite easy. So that would be interesting as well. Some of the most significant known issues today with EasyBuild, so I'm trying to be honest here, probably missing some stuff that you're annoyed about and haven't reported yet, or that I've been choosing to ignore. So installing EasyBuild is just way too painful still. It's a tool to install software with, but if you have to install EasyBuild, you have to be a little bit careful. If you use the bootstrap script and it works, it's usually fine. If it doesn't work, then it can be a bit of a pain in the ass. This is not really a fault of EasyBuild itself. It's a side effect of having EasyBuild implemented in Python, and the whole Python packaging ecosystem is just beyond fixing. They keep inventing new tools that claim that will fix all these issues, and they just make it worse and worse. In particular, setup tools, which is a required dependency for EasyBuild now, is a big pain in the ass. In the last couple of weeks, they've actually changed setup tools that you can no longer install setup tools with setup tools. I think that's a good thing. So you have to use one of the other Python install tools to install newer versions of setup tools. So rather than fixing things, they're making it way worse. So I've been thinking about a way to get rid of setup tools as a dependency, which is possible, but it requires a bit of work. We would basically, when we do a release, we would have to package everything in one big tarball, and that may be able to fix the problem. So we need setup tools now, so we can split the EasyBuild namespace across different locations. But we may be able to get rid of that. One other thing that needs some work, so sometimes in easyconfig files we're missing required dependencies, because where the easyconfig files were being tested, these dependencies were just available in the OS, something like zlib or maybe even cmake, so stuff that's there commonly. We may not actually realize that it has to be there for the build to work, and then when somebody else picks up the easyconfig file, it may not work for them because it's not there. A good way to ensure that we catch all the required dependencies would be testing the easyconfigs isolated from the OS. And this is something we could do with Singularity. Let's do questions afterwards. This is something we could do with Singularity maybe, and there's other ways as well. Something that has come up recently during the conf calls is the lack of good support for site customizations. So you can customize your easyconfigs already, and you typically do it by having a separate GitHub repository, which is a clone of the easyconfigs repository, and you patch your easyconfig files like the way you want it, and you just update every now and then, and if there are any conflicts with changes in existing easyconfig files, you just fix them and go along like this. We can do a lot better, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later. The maintenance burden of easyconfig files, which is mostly an issue for me, I guess, juggling all the contributions we are getting, and just the thousands of easyconfig files we have, and trying to keep them in sync can be very painful. We have some ideas there as well. So Alan, I think we'll be able to find some time to work on the YAML, the easyconfig files in YAML syntax, where we could add support to have basically several tool chains packaged into one single easyconfig file. So you would have like an easyconfig file for OpenFOAM 2.2, and it could say, I know how to build this, and this tool chain in a single file. So that already limits the amount of easyconfig files we have a little bit. And I'll come back to that later as well. Related to this, keeping up with contributions is hard. So we have over 300 open pull requests for easyconfig files now, which is good. I mean, getting lots of contributions is good, but keeping up is hard. So people get frustrated if their contributions don't get attention or stuff sits there for way too long, even though it's ready to go. So two things there. A little bit more help would be good, and we're getting there. So some people that contribute back often are now helping out more and more, reviewing incoming pull requests and testing them. So that's good, and I hope we can keep that going and speed it up more. And more automation is something also we can do. So we could automate the testing even further to get quicker feedback. We could make Travis actually complain in the pull request when the tests are not passing, so people get an email of something being wrong and so on. I'm probably missing stuff, but maybe after the talk, if there's something that has been annoying you in EasyBuild or that you think we're not doing in the right way, definitely let us know, and we can discuss it. Oh, I have the same thing again. Okay. And another thing that certainly has popped up in 2016 a couple of times is SPAC. So SPAC is a tool quite similar to EasyBuild, which is being developed at Lawrence Livermore in the US. So Todd Gamblin is the lead developer. They call it the flexible package manager for supercomputers. On a high level, it's similar to EasyBuild in the sense that it's also implemented in Python 2, and they also have like a concept like easy blocks. They call it package files. which are kind of a combination of EasyBlocks and EasyConfigs up to some level, so it's very comparable. They've been growing really, really fast in 2016. Their community has like exploded. They're close to the level that EasyBuild is in terms of community size. They have very good documentation. Also, when you read the docs, they have a couple of people that spend a lot of time in making the documentation better and better. They had a tutorial at Supercomputing that they fully integrated into their documentation, which is something I really like. So I'm going to steal that idea, do it for EasyBuild as well, because it works out really well. The spec command line is really powerful. So you can easily juggle the dependencies that you want to use, the compiler version, the OpenAPI version, and so on. So you can do like a partial specification of what you want to install, and then spec figures out the rest. It just looks which versions match to what you specified. And it figured things out as it goes, so it's very good. One of the downsides for now are it's not 100% stable yet, so if you're on the mailing list, you see people having problems very often with stuff that just should work out of the box and doesn't work at all. They get nasty crashes and Python tracebacks get thrown at them. In their defense, they haven't declared it as stable yet, so they don't have a 1.0 release yet. And that's actually their main target for the next couple of weeks and months. So they want to have a fully stable release and then do a better job at testing incoming contributions and making sure things keep stable. So that's the main target for now, as far as I know. In my view, spec is very interesting, it's very good, but the main target use case is different from EasyBuild. So I have the feeling that it's more intended for software developers that are developing a big scientific software package, and they just need a lot of dependencies that they need to install and juggle with. And you really need to have some expertise in software development. So you need to know a good amount of Python to use it well. You definitely know Git, because their installation mechanism is just git clone, and you just use it straight from the GitHub repository. If there are any updates, you just do a git pull and you pull in all the updates. So you have to be a little bit familiar with Git. And also, if you want to build stuff that is not there yet, you need packaging experience, and like packaging software, writing Python, which is certainly a lot less than in EasyBuild. So yeah, it has a different use case, a different target audience in my view. So future work for EasyBuild. So definitely getting the RPath support stable, adding runpad as an option is something I would certainly like to work on, because we're interested in Ghent into switching to only using RPath. Better support for site customizations, as I already mentioned. So we probably have to revive the EBP idea, which is like patch files to EasyConfig files, that EasyBuild can just say, oh, I have a patch file for this, I'll just slap it on and then do the build. So that would be a good way of only specifying your site customizations rather than keeping your own copy of the EasyConfig files. This idea has been there for a long, long time, but nobody has implemented it yet. So maybe it's time to pick up the idea again and actually do it. Support for the fat EasyConfig files in YAML. So that's something that Alan would like to work on. So the first step would be supporting multiple toolchains in a single EasyConfig file, because that's relatively easy to do. Later we could also extend that to having one single EasyConfig file for one particular software package and just specify that it knows how to install a particular version with a particular toolchain and have like a list of things that have been tested. At first sight, this looks like it mostly concerns just parsing of the EasyConfig files and then giving that to EasyBuild and letting it do its thing, but it's way beyond that. Because if you have a, let's say, a gcc.yap EasyConfig file, you have to be able to tell EasyBuild which version to build and maybe which toolchain to build it with. So you need better command line support as well. And then you run in trouble with maybe reproducing the build, because you can't just copy the EasyConfig file anymore. You actually have to hard code the version and toolchain that were used in there, so you can reproduce the builds later. So it's a little bit complex than it looks at first sight. Well, we have some good ideas on how to do it. You just have to do the work. Yep. Say again, the why EBP? Combining the EBP files and the YAML. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, the syntax is also different. So if you support the EBP files, you'll probably have to support it for both the Python-like syntax and the YAML syntax. So it will happen anyway. So the comment is that we don't really know how to implement EBP because you have to have some way of overriding what's there already. Actually, in Python EasyConfig files, it's very easy. If you take the EBP and just slap it on at the bottom, and it parses the file, if you redefine EasyBuild parameters, the last bit wins. So there it's trivial. It's actually more complex than the YAML syntax. But for the Python syntax, it's quite easy. You just slap it on at the bottom, and you can redefine things. It's Python. We would have to have a good look at what's actually needed, what kind of customizations people do now, and then see if we can meet those requirements with what we have in mind with EBP. And more future work is tying the knot between EasyBuild and Singularity. So this is part of the reason why we had Michael give the keynote on Singularity, because there are several ways that you could combine two tools. Or these two tools together. So one thing is we could run EasyBuild in isolation from the OS to make sure that we catch all the required dependencies. So you just hide what's on the OS, let EasyBuild run in the container, and if the installation worked, then that means all the dependencies are listed in the EasyConfig file. We could use EasyBuild to create Singularity images, and I know Greg is certainly interested in that as well. It shouldn't be too hard. I think it boils down to running EasyBuild in the bootstrap file. That's what I think it is. But we should try it and see what we come up with. It could also help with testing EasyBuild on different operating systems, because you could just have a Debian container, and then you test the build in the Debian container regardless of the host OS. So this could tell us whether the build actually works on Debian, for example. So there are several interesting combinations there that we could try to look into. And one thing else that has been suggested by Damien mainly is to have an EasyBuild tutorial at supercomputing. So it would be a bit of work, and my idea would be to do it in a similar way that Spag did, like pick the pieces from the documentation that make it a good story for a tutorial, and then integrate it all in the documentation, because that means the effort doesn't get lost, and it will enhance and improve the documentation quite a bit, so it doesn't stay just at supercomputing, it goes way beyond that. That's the slides I have, so time for questions and discussions. Balash. I'll repeat the question. Okay, so the comment is, if we test EasyBuild in isolation from the OS, that's only one part of the story. There could be stuff in the OS that actually break the build as well, which you wouldn't see if you test it in isolation from the existing OS. And the example is Qt. If you have Qt in the host system, it may be that the build works if you do not have Qt in the OS, and if you switch to an OS that has it installed, it may break the build. So by adding stuff extra to the OS, suddenly things may be breaking. So you have to test it both isolated from the OS and on a like fully loaded OS that has a whole bunch of crap that maybe shouldn't be there. Yeah, so you get both problems, that's true. It's possible that if the build works in isolation from the OS and then you test it in a real environment, stuff may break. Qt is just one example. You have the same problem with Python packages. If you have Python packages site-wide installed, they get picked up very easily, and it may be very hard to actually hide them from EasyBuild. So it's a similar issue to that, yeah. I think, so the comment is that if you install R packages, it may be picking up dependencies automatically. I think the way we install R packages, we do it with no depths, and we tell it don't install dependencies yourself. If they're not there, just throw an error so we know something is missing. For R, that's okay. For Python, we do have that problem. So with Python, you have to be very careful. If you install Python packages, setup tools will happily pick up all the dependencies that is needed if it doesn't find them yet. And you actually have to go back in the log and see if it installed dependencies that were not installed via EasyBuild yet. So yeah, depending on what you're doing. For Python, I think you can break it by giving it the wrong location of PyPy. I think you can give it an alternate location of the Python packaging index, and if it tries to download something, would you say, no, it's not there, and the build will hard fail. So if we want to make sure we get all the dependencies there, then yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's way too painful. You can also just test it on an offline system. Then you'll see it quite quickly that it tries to download something. Go back and cycle. Yeah. Yeah. There are ways to do that better. Somebody contributed a script to the EasyBuild framework repository that just goes to PyPy and sees what has to be there, and it just recursively adds the dependencies in front, and then it gives you a full list of things to install. It's not 100% perfect, but it's like it saves you a lot of time just by grabbing that list and then cycling over that. It's there, yeah. And we're going to try and get it integrated in EasyBuild itself as just a separate command line option. Now it's a standalone script, and it kind of works. I mean, Rob has been playing with that for a while. Were you testing it with Python, or was it R? I think it was R. The script that was added by, was it Bob? Yeah, so there's something there. It's not mature, no. But it's a good thing to start from if you want to integrate a feature like that in EasyBuild itself. It has some good ideas there that have to be polished a bit. Yeah, well, that's something we can discuss. Any other comments? Yeah, Adam. So the question is if I feel it's a problem that we have an accumulation of open PRs, or? Do I feel if I'm getting further behind with contributions? No, not really. I think it was worse like 2 years ago. Partially because I didn't have a good way of handling it myself, and also because I was getting way less help. So recently I've always had somebody in our team who I've been able to like pull him by the hair and say, you have to help me out now because it's getting crazy. With Wart going away from our team, that's again an issue. So now I'm actually trying to reach out more and more to contributors outside of our team, like you, like Rob, to getting more involved with reviewing contributions, and it has been working out quite okay. So I have a feeling that I've built up enough, how do you say it, not reputation, but people are willing to help me out if I ask them to. And also the automation part, so the from PR, but that has been there for quite a while. So I have lots of scripts that just automatically test contributions. The switch to Travis has been a major, major help. It's saving me lots of time just not waiting for the tests anymore. Stuff like this. So I have a feeling it's getting better, but it can improve still a lot. I'm spending way too much time on simple things. Very repetitive tasks that we could get rid of. Yeah. So we are aware of a couple of people that are now learning to use the new PR stuff that makes it very easy to make contributions. And they're sitting on a huge pile of easyconfig files. So once they find some time to write a script that just loops over their stuff, then we'll probably have 1,000 new PRs or something. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so the comment is there's no good excuse to not contribute back, or just not put it somewhere that's publicly available. Yeah, sure. So there, Pablo, for example, just pushes everything he has, even though he knows it's not ready for merging, but it's his way of sharing it with everybody. And one more open pull request if you already have 350 open, doesn't really matter. I mean, I don't care about the number. Having 350 or 200 or 100 doesn't really make a difference. As long as you get enough activity of getting reviews, contributions reviewed and tested and merged, then it's okay. We have a growing pile of things, and at some point we'll have to like just close the 100 most outdated pull requests just to get rid of them. But there's no real value in doing that. You see a number going down, but we don't spend time on them anyway. And there are other ways. So opening a pull request is just one way of making it available to others. There are several sites that have their own custom repositories publicly on GitHub. So you got something going to get. So Rob and Adam have something for bioinformatics that they've been trying to get started. The people in Cyprus have their own repository. At CSES, there's a repository mostly focused on Cray, but it's a little bit beyond Cray. Guys in Ulich are sitting on a private repository, which is one other way of doing it. Yeah, Damien and Alan are. Yeah, sure, makes sense. Yeah. 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 Okay. Yeah. So there are plans to open up the JSC repository as well. Good. I don't mind. I mean, either way, if either you contribute centrally and just get it included in the next EasyBuild release, or you set up your own repository where you have more control, of course. If you contribute back, we're relying on actually the PRs getting merged before they get fully, yeah. Would be, yeah. Because you use the minimal tool chain setup and things like that, yeah. Lots of site customizations as well, custom tool chains, yeah. Yeah. Maybe it makes sense to just keep the repository standalone, yeah, or separate. Rob, you had something? Not yet, no. I don't think it's mature enough. It works, it's stable, but it needs a couple more checks in there, because if we're gonna start automatic style checking, we better just, if we turn on the switch, it has to be there fully. Like not halfway and then add another check, and another check, because we have to revisit open PRs over and over and over again. Or actually the merge easy configs over and over again. There's like 6,000 there, and if you enable the style check, all of them have to pass the style check. Otherwise, they just can't enable it.
So I think that coming up with some automatic testing would require you to be
Yeah.
test the build, test the style.
Yeah, a better feedback loop. Yeah. That's one of the things I meant with better automation. So now if the Travis tests fail, you actually have to actively go back to the pull request and check if they failed or not. What should be happening is if the Travis tests fail, you should get a comment in the PR that says they failed and this and this and this is wrong. Please come back to it and fix it. So you just have a feedback loop going on. And then when it turns green, it could say, Kenneth, now this looks ready to go, so take a look at it. Or add it to your list of PRs to consider for merge. So yeah, we can do a lot better. The reason it's not there yet, so Jenkins used to do that. Jenkins used to say in the pull requests, the tests are broken, please take a look. With Travis, that doesn't work because they are very careful at Travis with sharing GitHub tokens in your builds, because it's easy to, so the GitHub token that is being used to run the tests, you can easily steal it with the malicious pull request. And then you get like write access to the repository. So they're very careful with doing that. So what you have to do is basically have an external service checking the pull requests, like a cron job, going over the last updated pull request and see if the build failed or not. And if it failed, it drops in a comment and says, look at this link, something is broken. So you can't really do it via Travis, but otherwise we would have enabled it already. So yeah, a bit better feedback loop for pull requests. You can with 3.1. In 3.1 there's a style check command line option that will check the style, that will run the checks that are there now. Yeah, that's one way of doing it. Yeah, you just need to have it. No, but we are all sitting on a big cluster. That's not a big issue. I said big clusters. You're not that big. For us, this is not an issue. I just submit jobs that are sitting in the queue, like other users. If it takes a day to run the test, I don't care. I don't have time to look at it anyway. Yeah. It would be good if also other people started running more tests. But the no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to rebuild the whole toolchain for every test. No, you have to be sitting on stuff that's prepared. Yeah. I think it's as simple as it's going to get. So the GitHub integration, there's one step that you have to do to configure it. But once it's configured, you can do from PR, upload test report, it just works.
It's just the audit.
Should. Yeah, but that's also a security concern. Because people can open a malicious pull request with an easy config file, which is just executed as Python code. It could wipe your whole file system, your home directory. So you don't want to test incoming pull requests just blindly. I don't want my home directory wiped. Yeah. Separately. Yeah, sure. Or if you do it in a container, then it's fine. You could mount your home directory read-only or whatever. Singularity certainly opens doors there to do better. Sorry, Travis supports Docker. Yeah. So we could. Yeah, but the thing is with Travis, actually doing the builds, the software builds, something like OpenFOAM takes 4 or 5 hours, and on Travis you just don't get that much time, at least not in the free version. So you really need to go on hardware that you have your own to do full builds. Some you could test, like the ones that only take a couple of minutes, you could test those on Travis, sure, but not everything. Maybe that's like an in-between solution we could use. It could get rid of like 80% of pull requests that could be tested automatically, sure. Any further questions? There will be plenty of time for more discussions. So we should just, yeah, we have a couple more minutes. Marcus.
So what's the feeling about the, say, the future default names for contributions? So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
with let's say GCC core,
Mm-hmm.
which is what we're doing,
Mm-hmm.
for example. So what do you think is the future
So,
way of
so,
accepting things, or
so the question is what are our plans for the default naming scheme for contributions, and well, maybe not the naming scheme, but the minimal tool chain setup, like using subtool chains versus full tool chains, or that. I'm not sure. We're trying not to force anything on people, which is kind of what we're doing now already by mostly accepting pull requests that have full tool chains. If we do it with subtool chains, we're just forcing the. I don't know if there's a good thing there.
From be able to follow up the question here. For instance, some popular supplies hundreds of buffer managed packages, but you make sure you create a new tool chain to recompile them against. However, is it really the best interest of everybody to try to say new tool chain for everything when most of this just rely on the compiler? Should we be doing it in a particular way? Maybe that's the question we can ask before. Do we want to have minimal dependency as opposed to all the chains?
if you have something that you know works with GCC core, then using try-to chain with FOSS.
It's gonna work. Yeah, it should. Yeah, it's very likely it's gonna work. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe you want to try and push more to letting contributions use minimal tool chains as much as possible.
I don't know. I mean, it's user reviews. Maybe
So one thing I think, is it you, Damien, or Alan maybe? One thing is also there automation again comes in. You could force that people have to specify in the easyconfig files what is needed. Does it only need a compiler? Does it also need an MPI? And then you could automatically like downgrade the toolchain to the minimal level that it has to be when you get contributions in. And then you could also specify in your EasyBuild configuration, like, okay, even if they are there with the minimal toolchain, my site policy is to use full toolchains. So it can also just switch back automatically to the compatible full toolchain. We do all the time to keep the naming scheme the same.
Yeah, but that's a model issue, right? That's how you create a model layout, but not necessarily when you use compiler. You can load FOSS, and FOSS can take care of loading the other tool chains.
Yeah.
That just a matter of how you organize your model structure.
Yeah.
Not necessarily how or at which level of the hierarchy you put the
So the reason we use full tool chains all the time in Ghent, I think is twofold. One aspect is we don't have to think about what the software actually needs. We do full tool chains all the time. Whatever it needs is going to be there, except for dependencies. But like MPI only, or compiler MPI, compiler only, does it use BLAS, does it use FFTW? Okay, whatever. Full tool chains all the time. And what also helps is that we have a flat module naming scheme. So most of our builds are called FOSS, 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 FOSS. And we tell the users, like, if you're loading 2 or 3 modules together, make sure they have the same FOSS version in them, otherwise they're not compatible. So we're pushing the burden a little bit to users more. But if we would be using subtool chains like GCC Core and Compy and FOSS, we would have to tell users like these 3 line up, so you can combine these. It makes things too complex for them. So maybe it's a side effect of not using a hierarchy, that we're still stuck to full tool chains. And it's very difficult. It's a site-specific policy. How do you? I think for them, the reason you go with minimal toolchains is because you have the hierarchy, right? You want to make as much as stuff possible available by default, and then if they pick a compiler, they get more things.
It just saves work.
Yeah. It saves duplication, saves modules. Yeah. You could hide stuff from users that are not interested anyway. Yeah, like. We could do that. Yeah, we could make it clear what are build dependencies and what are real like applications via something like Elmod properties, for example. Because you would have fancy colors in module avail and it would pop up straight away. That's a question that it popped up on the Elmod mailing list recently. If EasyBuild supports properties already, it doesn't yet. But yes. So the question is, Spec is more targeted toward software developers and it allows you to more easily set up your environment using Spec itself to use Spec and install software with it. And if we have the same thing in mind for EasyBuild, yes, a little bit. And this ties back to my first point here, that installing EasyBuild is too painful. This also relates to the hard dependencies that EasyBuild has, like environment modules or Elmod. Maybe also to Python, because we're still Python 2, which is becoming a bit of a concern because there's a big push towards Python 3. And making EasyBuild compatible with Python 3 is going to be a big effort, so it relates to that as well. And also, I didn't mention this earlier before, but the optional dependencies that EasyBuild has, for example, like the keyring module, so you could pull stuff from GitHub, or GC3Py, so you can submit jobs with EasyBuild. Installing those now so EasyBuild can use them is a manual process. And EasyBuild knows how to install all of these things. So if you just have a button like, make this a fat EasyBuild install, provide everything that is needed to use EasyBuild. So there's some ideas there. Again, finding time to do it is difficult because for us, we have our setup, everything works. And Fotis has been doing some work on this, like taking the bootstrap, and so has Alan, by the way. Taking the bootstrap a lot further, so you can also bootstrap the modules tool itself and even Python itself without having Python on the system. And then it gets really interesting because you're running EasyBuild without having Python. So you build Python first and then you run EasyBuild on top of, yeah. It's a fun experience. So Jack says that using the minimal toolchains also in a flat scheme really helps. It helps for users as well. I'm not sure. Our users would have trouble. That's my concern. That's why we haven't done it up until now. Unless we have a good way of really marking what is compatible with what, and maybe Elmod can help. Yeah, so users just know what they have to load to get what they want. And in my experience, it's mostly when users combine multiple modules together, like bioinformaticians that need 2 or 3 tools at the same time. How will they figure out that this GCC core version matches this FOSS version? Okay, okay, that helps. Better documentation helps. If users, if they actually read the documentation, then yes, it helps. That's a big if, yeah. Okay, but that's interesting. Maybe we should reconsider our policy then. Yeah, sure. Okay, it's 11, so we should maybe close it down here. We can have further discussions throughout the day, so don't worry.